For Cardinal Fernandez to say this isn't clear and useful, he's arguing against the whole history of Catholic doctrine and the practices of the popes and the saints.
So is the document a suggestion? Is it a command? Are we obliged?
There's an attempt here to downplay Catholic doctrines that are objected to by Protestants because that doesn't help ecumenism. The Co-Redeemer title and the Mediatrix title. But that is not a justification for putting aside a teaching simply because it's difficult to understand or explain.
I want to switch topics and talk about Charlotte if we could. Charlotte, North Carolina, the bishop there has put out an order.
I'm not going to deny parishioners communion simply because they're kneeling in a place you don't want them to. Is the greatest problem in the church people who like traditional liturgy? Of course not.
By the way, my name is Joe McLean. I host a radio program called A Catholic Take, where we look at the world through a Catholic lens. I'd love for you to hang out with us. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and let us know what you think in the comments below.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean. Praise be to God. It is good to be on with you. We're still talking about the document Mater Populi Fidelis. Came out, I guess it was almost 2 weeks ago now, on Our Lady's titles from the DDF. And let me just quote you this real quick from an article I'm going to link to in the show notes from St. Irenaeus, 2nd century Bishop of Lyon, talking about Our Lady as compared to Eve. Mary, this is a quote, Mary having the predestined man, yet being a virgin, being obedient, became both to herself and to the whole human race the cause of salvation. I mean, there's an entire list here of saints, popes, great Catholics over the 2 millennia that have embraced Our Lady in this powerful way, and yet the Vatican is suggesting we shouldn't be using these titles. That's been confusing to the lay folk, and Father Gerald Murray joins us this morning to weigh in. Father Murray, thank you for your time today. Good morning.
Good morning, Joe.
So, what is going on here? Why do you figure the Vatican, the DDF in particular, is suggesting we shouldn't use these titles?
Well, the motivations are hard to fix because they're not specifically stated, except at one point, Cardinal Fernandez writes that teachings that have to be constantly re-explained over time are not useful because they're not clear to people. And he says that about the Co-Redeemer title and the Mediatrix title. But that is not a justification for putting aside a teaching simply because it's difficult to understand or explain. We do theology courses over many years for seminarians to try and help them understand the meaning of the Apostles' Creed. And if that's the case, then synodality should be cast aside immediately because it's very hard to explain and nobody understands it and commonly mistakes it. So I think my guess is that there's an attempt here to downplay Catholic doctrines that are objected to by Protestants because that doesn't help ecumenism. But the two teachings that we have here are very traditional and understood. Let's take Co-Redeemer. There is no notion that Mary died for the salvation of our souls. That's not what Co-Redeemer means. Jesus is the unique Redeemer, but Jesus associates with himself other people, namely believers, those who are with him. We co-redeem in the sense that we extend in time and space the effects of the grace won on the cross by Christ. And just as Christ came into the world through Mary, we say that Christ comes into the lives of others through Mary also. As regards Mediatrix, we are all instruments in the hands of God. And a mediator is someone who brings something from one person and brings it to another. Well, we can certainly say that about Our Lady. And it's interesting because there have been some very good critiques about this document, including Bishop Athanasius Schneider, Professor Mark Miravalle. There was a Mass authorized by Pope Benedict XV in honor of Our Lady Mediatrix of all graces. That Mass was authorized for use in Belgium. So for Cardinal Fernandez to say this isn't clear and useful, he's arguing against the whole history of Catholic doctrine and the practices of the popes and the saints. So I think there's a very mistaken publication and really should just be cast aside.
Surely he knows that, though, right, Father? I mean, he must be aware, as the head of the doctrine for the One Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, that these popes, these great saints, Saint Maximilian Kolbe loved the title of co-redeemer. I mean, there's just so many great saints, so many popes, Leo the 13th, Pius the 10th, Pius the 12th, you mentioned Benedict 15th, JP2. I mean, there's just a giant list. He must be aware of all that. And I mean, if I had $1 for every time a Protestant struggled with my trying to explain to them papal infallibility, I'd be a very wealthy man right now. But there's a lot of things about the Catholic faith that many people simply don't understand, and B, don't want to understand, and we have to repeat these things over and over and over again. We don't throw them out just because it's hard, right?
Of course not. And otherwise, we would basically say, Christianity is a religion of the nursery. If you can put in a nursery rhyme, we can have it. Otherwise, it's too complicated. No, we don't believe that. That's a caricature. And certainly, the Catholic Church teaches that understanding the role of Christ and Mary, how the fact that the incarnation took place through the birth, Mary being born, Christ being born of Mary. This is a key to understanding all of history and providence. So Mary's role in giving birth to Christ has to be studied, understood, and then understood in the spiritual sense. Remember what Christ said from the cross to Our Lady: "Behold your son." He's referring to St. John. St. John represents all of us. He represents every believer in the history of the world. So if she's our mother, then we have a relationship that's similar to that what Christ has. So therefore, to understand that is going to take a lot of meditation. This kind of activity, it reminds me, sad to say, what Cardinal Fernandez did under Pope Francis, which he issued a decree about the judgment of private revelations. And he said, we're no longer going to pronounce on the truth or the supernatural origin. We're simply going to observe what the effects are. That's never how the church has done things. So this is kind of like an innovation trend, and I think it's a mistaken trend. And I don't think this document is going to have the effect that he desires, which is to stop people from looking at Mary as the one Christ utilizes to bring his grace into the world.
I think it's going to set us back in the dialogue with Protestants, because now they're like, see, all you Catholics trying to tell us about Mary, you need to stop because even your Vatican says so. So is the document, is it a suggestion? Is it a command? Are we obliged to do as this document suggests and not refer to her as co-redeemer or mediatrix?
Well, it's the language used. It's not. They don't anathematize people who say Mary is the mediator of all grace. They say it's inopportune. It's inappropriate. Inappropriate in the eyes of Cardinal Fernandez, and Pope Leo approved of it. So Pope Leo agrees with it too. But we can have debates about what's appropriate or not, and certainly, a lot of the things that the church has done, in recent years would be considered inappropriate by earlier pontiffs. So we sit down and discuss them to see, well, have circumstances changed? Was it simply a contingent practice in the church? And as regards doctrines, appropriateness is not the issue. Is it true or not? That's what really comes to mind as the category for judgment.
I want to switch topics and talk about Charlotte, if we could. Charlotte, North Carolina, the bishop there has put out an order asking every single parish in his diocese to not use the altar rails, to remove the kneelers where communion might be given out to the lay faithful. And he expects the lay faithful to receive standing and in the hand. And this, of course, didn't go over well there. Many people in the diocese are very upset about this. The question I have is over the debate over canon law, because many are saying actually, that the bishop doesn't have authority according to canon law to enforce this. Where is the canon law on this issue?
Well, let me say my understanding, and you can correct me, is that a pastor reported that this decree was coming to his parish, and then that became the news. I don't think the decree has yet been published by the diocese. Is that correct?
The video clip that I'll be linking to is the priest announcing the announcement to his parish. So it comes across as though this is the actual announcement that the chancery has given us to make. That's how it's being communicated.
Sure, and I'm not doubting that the priest is telling the truth and that he wants to tell his parishioners what's happened. But I need to see the decree exactly to get the full details. Because, for instance, the people have a right to receive communion kneeling. The bishop cannot deny that. Second, people have a right to receive communion on the tongue. The bishop cannot deny that. So if he says those things in the document, then that's certainly, he's going beyond his powers, and he's interfering with the rights of the faithful to perform Catholic worship as the universal church allows in its law. Now, as regards removing kneelers or altar rails, the bishop does have the right to issue diocesan legislation about liturgical arrangements in the church. So that right can be exercised. Now, it's supposed to be exercised in a rational way, which is sort of in harmony with the nature of the liturgy. And so I would say, strictly speaking, he has the power to tell priests you cannot have an altar rail, you can't have kneelers. But that doesn't mean people can't kneel and receive communion or kneel at the altar to pray. They just won't have the altar rail or the kneeler to kneel on. And that's where you say, Bishop, you should reconsider this, because it's a lack of charity to people who are old, people who have, medical issues, people who need the support of a kneeler or an altar rail if they want to kneel down. Why would that be denied? My goodness, the whole history of the Catholic Church is to make it easy for people to pray, not to make it more difficult. So I think, as we know from this bishop's previous actions, he has a hostility to traditional liturgical ways. And this seems just to be a further extension of it. And I would ask him, please re-examine your presuppositions here. Is the greatest problem in the church people who like traditional liturgy? Of course not. Are people kneeling down to receive communion? Is that really a problem? Of course not. That becomes a problem simply for those who consider that old ways have to be done away with. And for me, that's just a personal imposition that has nothing to do with the law of the Catholic Church.
What happens in this circumstance where there's a parish that has altar rails as a part of their, as part of their church for many, many, many years? And the bishops now said you can't use those. And so they have the communion lines up in the main aisle, let's just say. But the lay folk decide, you know what, we're going to go to the altar rail anyway. Will the parish priest be forced to not give them communion in that circumstance? It becomes very awkward very fast. What happens?
Yeah, well, again, this is, I have to see the decree to figure out exactly what the bishop is saying. For instance, if he says you can have an altar rail, but you can't use it, that he can command priests not to distribute communion at it, but the lay people can say, well, I have a right to receive communion kneeling, and I can't kneel down on the ground, outside of the altar. I'm going to kneel on the ground. And then the priest will say, well, the duty of charity is to administer the sacraments, because the people have a right to receive the sacraments. So in that case, the priest say, Bishop, I'm sorry, the people want to do it this way. Give me further guidance. But in the meantime, I'm not going to deny parishioners communion simply because they're kneeling in a place you don't want them to. Now, I want to see if the decree says you have to remove altar rails. I don't know if that's going to say that.
There are rumors, but we don't know. This has not been verified that they're, in fact, trying to remove altar rails from some of the churches. Again, not verified, just being spoken of online.
Joe, the thing is, the priest in the parish could get the decree and then write to the bishop, say, Bishop, I'm having canonical recourse against this decree because I think it violates X, Y, Z in the Catholic canon law. And then he can start a process to try and defend it. That's always possible.
Do you think the issue is coming to a head? Do you think His Holiness Pope Leo will weigh in on all of this? Because it seems to be a very contentious issue that's just getting worse. We all kind of thought with the passing of Francis, God rest his soul, that we would see a change here, but we really haven't. There has been some positive signs, but do you think he's going to weigh in definitively on this soon?
I don't know. What I do know is that now that Pope Leo is giving interviews to the media, Castle Gandolfo, on a semi-regular basis, a reporter could ask a question to see what he says. But look, the Pope has said Mass facing east. The Pope has shown great reverence in the celebration of Mass. I don't know why he wouldn't be sympathetic to people. Why is an 80-year-old grandmother being told she can't kneel down anymore? I don't think the Pope would accept that to be a good way of presenting the faith by a diocesan bishop.
Did you like that video? It's okay. You can admit it. It's perfectly fine. Hey, we cover the big stories of our day, from inside the church to outside the church to all points in between, and we do it from a Catholic perspective. It's called A Catholic Take. It's a radio program Monday through Friday. We live stream it right here on this channel, by the way, so make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We would be very grateful to you. And don't forget, you're going to want to watch this video right here because you don't want to miss anything.